All right, everybody, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is a Legislative Affairs, Ethics, Transparency, and Communications Council Committee meeting for Wednesday, March 28, 2018. Let the record reflect that both Mayor Pro Tem and I were here on time, but we had some matters that we needed to deal with the press outside, so we took care of those. Madam Secretary, will you call roll?
Yes. Chair Sarmiento.
Here.
Vice Chair Martinez.
Present.
Great, thank you for that. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Madam Secretary, do we have any requests to speak or any written correspondence that we received in advance?
No, not for this meeting.
And I want, as some of you may know, I run this meeting very informally. So if any member of the public or staff has any comment to make, please just go ahead and raise your hand. We'll recognize you and you'll have the floor. That being said, I'm going to try to rifle through most of these other matters. I may take some matters out of order. I may bundle a couple of these just because I see that some of them are related, and we'll try to get through these as quickly as possible. So moving on to the first agenda item, which is the approval of the minutes, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Approved. And moving on to item number 2, I believe, excuse me, Madam Secretary, we now have our friends from Washington joining us on the phone, Holland and Knight. And do we have both Dan and Leslie with us?
Yes, we do. They're on the phone.
How are you, Dan and Leslie?
We're doing good. We're doing good, yes.
Great. Well, listen, we're going to go ahead and give the floor to you so you can go ahead and give us a report, but I wanted to preface your comments by saying I went through the staff report and your report to us, and I want to congratulate you and applaud what how you modified your report to tailor it to Santa Ana. I see Mayor Pro Tem's head nodding and the staff members' head nodding as well, but it is a vast improvement. Not saying that the work was poor before, but it just is very nicely tailored to what we asked for, and it was very clear. It's very helpful, by the way, and just kudos to you guys. Thank you for taking direction from this committee and tailoring the reports to reflect Santa Ana's needs. And with that, I'll go ahead and give you the floor. And with that's kind of a nice presentation, isn't it?
Well, thank you. And I'm going to apologize. For whatever reason, I'm having a slight problem hearing, and so I'm wondering if there's any way to put the speakerphone closer. That would be super helpful.
Well, just know that we gave you some nice compliments. So you missed all the detail, but in general, it was good news.
So that is great. Ian, you want me to lead off, and then you want to?
Yeah, why don't you start? I think there's a lot of meat in what has occurred over the last couple of weeks in terms of the omnibus bill. Obviously, there's some difficult policy issues related to DACA and to the census that we can also discuss as well. Since all of these impact Santa Ana, so. Yeah, if Leslie could do the walkthrough on sort of the funding side and where we think we are with that, and its direct impact on Santa Ana.
Leslie, the floor is yours.
As Dan, you've got 2 reports in front of you. Our update, and of course, as Dan was mentioning, so much has actually happened that we've actually had to do an update to the update. And so, bottom line though is that Congress finally passed their $1.3 trillion FY18 omnibus spending bill. And, after several continuing resolutions, we're basically 6 months now into the fiscal year, but they finally did it. And it's a fairly good news story on the funding side of things. On the policy side, of course, this is probably going to be one of the last vehicles that we see leaving the station before the November elections. And, of course, there had been a lot of hope that a DACA fix would be attached to this package. And despite some last-minute negotiations that happened the weekend before, the package doesn't include a resolution to DACA. And Dan can spend a little more time talking about the details there. But unfortunately, they were not able to do it. That said, this is a pretty good package for domestic spending, particularly when you think about what the alternative was that we were facing, which is sequestration, and the fairly low levels that we've been dealing with over the past several years. And so we noted, a number of the highlights, but just to quickly run through, and we can talk in more detail, $1.5 billion for Tiger, which may end up being a source of funding for some of Santa Ana's transportation priorities. It includes $1.5 billion for New Starts, which means, The Santa Ana streetcar should be getting its funding. An expansion of the low-income housing tax credit. That's temporary. It's a 4-year expansion, but nevertheless very, very valuable for affordable housing. A $300 million increase for CDBG, a $412 million increase for home, a significant increase for homeless assistance grants, which includes emergency solution grants. There was a number of, there was a lot of discussion around marijuana and seeing whether or not there could be some, reinstatement of the Cole memo through appropriations. And unfortunately, they could not get to agreement on the language. However, the Leahy Amendment, which basically says that DOJ funds cannot be used to go after, cannot interfere with state medical marijuana policies, was included. And then, there is, although not a priority, certainly something that has an impact for Santa Ana, some new language around allowing CDC to research gun violence, which has been something that advocates have pushed for quite some time. So overall, a fairly good news story. We included a chart that outlines kind of some of the increases and also details some of the funding that Santa Ana has previously received from those pots. Some of those are formula funding, and some of them have also been competitive grants, so hard to say exactly how much Santa Ana will get this go-around, but generally a pretty good story. Dan, anything you want to add?
No, I think on the funding side, it certainly, including the UWASI funding as well, I think puts Santa Ana in a strong position in terms of getting federal resources across the board.
I think the only other thing to highlight too is that part of the holdup on getting this bill through was that there had been efforts to put a number of very dangerous policy riders on the bill, and things like defunding sanctuary cities, and those were not defunding Planned Parenthood. Those were not included in the legislation, and I want to highlight that particularly in light of some of the actions that Orange County has recently taken. So just want to note that that was not included.
So just quickly on the policy side, and we can, obviously if there's questions, we can get into more detail. But so the omnibus, so the deal was trying to be struck that for DACA, in which the administration sort of reneged on its original commitment to try to do the right thing with DACA and to balance that with some of the border security numbers that they wanted. They kept changing the goalpost, and it basically came down to, hey, if we're going to give you a temporary fix on DACA, we want $25 billion for our wall, and then on immigration, we want changes. Now the administration at the last moment backed off on some of the immigration changes, but the Freedom Caucus in the House certainly didn't, and the whole deal just fell apart. I mean, there was no deal from the Democratic leadership side, their view being that either you did something right on DACA or you didn't do it at all, and that we were in a stronger position given what's currently before the courts, and to revisit this issue when there was, a better situation than the one that the administration was offering. On the wall, the administration didn't get what it wanted. So there is no funding for a concrete wall. There's funding for about 33 miles of new border fencing, which are only levees and fences that have already been approved and are authorized in the previous legislation, plus a separate pot for technology. So all of that adds up to about $1.6 billion compared to the $25 billion that the administration was looking for. And there's explicit language saying what kind of construction could be used in the fencing technology, and making it clear that there was no money for construction of a concrete wall. There's also no increase in the number of interior ICE agents that the administration had been seeking to accelerate its interior raids. So in that sense, there's good news. Of course, it doesn't stop the interior raids, but at least it handicaps the sort of random unilateral approach that the ICE has taken on these things. So anyway, I think the bottom line is we are going to end up revisiting all of these issues again. As you heard, Trump is trying to find a way to use the $700 billion on the defense side to use some of that for a concrete wall, but that requires congressional action. He cannot do that by himself. It's a reprogramming request that would have to be approved by both the House and Senate. It would require a 60-vote majority in the Senate side. Just the votes aren't there.
So moving off the omnibus for a second onto Census 2020, as you all know, Department of Commerce has agreed to DOJ's request and is saying that they will include a question about citizenship on the census, which has not been included since 1950. California, AG Becerra quickly has filed suit, as have a number of other states. It is obviously becoming a major source of contention and will continue to be. I think congressionally there is concern, and I think looking back, some folks sort of wish that they had used appropriations to explicitly prohibit Commerce from including this question. And there may be still time, should the House split, for example, to revisit this issue. But obviously speaks to the need at the local level to really, really organize well around this. The census did get a significant increase in funding to the tune of $2.85 billion, with $2.5 directed towards periodic activities, which includes the census. We don't know, how they will choose to allocate that fund. We don't know, if they will spend it appropriately and in the measures, of course, that we would, and activities that we would recommend. But there are resources available.
Right, and let me just add two quick comments on that. One is in terms of the increase, the $1.3 billion that was added over the budget. Will be a very strong push to use much of that money for field operations. The argument here is that part of the reason why you had to have an increase is because they had proposed cutting back on the field operation on the theory that if you go online and you do all this technology approach, that supposedly saves money. And so here we're adding money here, and so the effort is to focus on the field operation, which is extremely important, especially when you have significant non-responses among many of our households, especially in immigrant communities. So that's one thing. The second thing is strategically that there may be another play with this issue come the the FY19 appropriations bills. So that revisit may occur. I won't say necessarily sooner, but certainly still within the time frame before they officially go out with the census.
So let me just jump in really quickly, Leslie and Dan, and thank you guys for that. Before I go ahead and open it up to the committee and to staff, I just wanted to tell you, I love this matrix, by the way. So you guys did a great job on this because it's very easy to read. And what I always ask for, I know in staff reports, and you guys anticipated this, is if we're looking at seeking additional monies, well, what is it that we received last year, right? And so that gives us a good indication of, threshold amounts and where we were and where we are. So thank you for doing that. Let me go ahead and open it up to Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilman Sarmiento. Very quickly, hi Dan, hi Leslie, hope all of you are well. And,
Yes?
so very quick question for you as it pertains, and it's good news, I'm glad we're moving forward, we're gonna have some extra dollars for CDBG. One of the questions that I did have for you all as it pertains to kind of our housing funds and the news that I've been seeing with the Secretary of HUD and his position and the next steps that he's trying to take. Will that have any impact on us, or is this something that he's considering moving specifically with the LGBT community as it pertains to housing and the homeless? Have you been paying attention to that?
Leslie?
Hello?
So I'm not sure that I'm fully understanding the
So,
question. Can you?
Yes, so the current Secretary of HUD, there's been some articles written as it pertains to funding towards LGBT community, as it pertains to housing, just in general, but more on the attack regarding the homeless population, that he's wanting to remove funding and will not allow cities to move forward to fund that.
So I have not seen that issue specifically, but it would be consistent with, a number of things that, this, no surprise, this administration has generally not been particularly friendly towards LGBT issues, and frankly, it's been pretty hostile. But that I have not seen. Are you talking about for ESG or which?
For all fundings, according to what I'm trying to look for the article that he mentioned.
You would be talking about also homeless, foster youth.
Yes,
LGBT,
correct, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I think what I don't know if it's an official position. I think it's certainly those issues that were so much more prominent in the previous administration as is more of a footnote here. And as Leslie indicated that there is less commitment, if not hostility. But I do think that the additional resources that certainly were fundamental to the Democratic signing off on this omnibus bill is going to be, from an oversight standpoint, through the appropriations process. There is an opportunity to raise all kinds of questions related to what they're doing or not doing. And I would suspect that there is going to be an effort to make sure that the money is being spent where it's supposed to be spent for LGBT.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Thank
But
you.
we're also happy, Councilmember Martinez, to check in and also see, we do obviously a lot of work with a number of LGBT groups, and so happy to also kind of check in and make sure that we're not missing anything. So just can follow up on that.
Okay, fantastic. And then my other question in regards to some of the work, workforce housing dollars. I know sometimes those monies are funneled through different agencies, not directly to the city. And so the question that I had, do you know when exactly those monies will be funded to those different agencies? Because it says it's coming to the city of Santa Ana, but sometimes it's regional. And sometimes we're partnering. So will we receive all these funds, or is this just based on last year's or the couple past years in the past, what we currently receive? Because what I see here as it pertains to the workforce, it says that in 2017 we were awarded 3.3, and now we're getting 254 million. So it's a $15 million difference from FY 2017, but it says 3.3, 254.
Yeah, I think we need to. The other number, of course, is actually based on the actual amount that you directly received.
Okay.
I think we just need to clarify that so there isn't a misunderstanding about that pot of money all of a sudden in the city's hands when it's still waiting for the county and the Workforce Investment Board to distribute the funds.
Yeah.
So, I think we just need to kind of sort of reframe that.
Okay, yeah, that was my only question on those two issues, and I thank you all very much for putting this together. as we move forward with the census, and obviously we're having a workshop tomorrow here with partners of the school district and NALEO. Obviously, the census issue is definitely should be very concerning for all cities across the United States, not just only from losing potential funding and the funding that we're kind of talking about here now, and specifically in regards to CDBG, but more about representation is a huge concern. We can lose seats, and that really it can lessen our power here in California. And I think that is the direction that they're wanting to take. And so we have to be very vigilant and figure out what strategies are we going to have to be able to combat this, because obviously the money is very concerning, but more so representation is very important for us in Washington, D.C., and making sure that we have the appropriate representation to continue to fight for these dollars. And so whatever you all can do to help us and keep us in the loop, so we can do whatever we can to help advocate and partner up with the various stakeholders throughout Orange County. I think this is a moment in time where it can't be one city by one city. It literally has to be a coalition of all 34 cities to move forward and making sure that, at the end of the day, the cities do get their money, but it's all going to be based on the count. And obviously with this new question that is being posed on the questionnaire is going to cause a lot of problems. And obviously cities like Santa Ana, Anaheim, and Irvine will be severely impacted, and including Garden Grove and Westminster, when I look at the cities in Orange County and as it pertains to diverse communities here in this region. And so obviously, we're going to be there tomorrow, and I'm hopeful that Councilman Sarmiento will articulate that, and hoping that we're able to partner up. But again, any messaging that we can get from you all or assistance would be greatly appreciated.
Right, and we'll keep you informed on sort of strategically what might be the next moves, other than litigation. Obviously, the litigation is uppermost, and it's there, and it has to be dealt with in the courts. And whether there's, a temporary injunction or whatever it may be, Vince, you're the authority on this stuff. So I defer to you about, what's possible on the legal front. But clearly, there's going to be some discussion politically what might be necessary, particularly if the clock gets stretched out on the court side.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And before we go on, I just wanted to remind staff and the public, Jerry,
Great.
Ernie, Dave,
Thank you.
there's lunch. Please help yourself to some food. We know we're meeting at the lunch hour, so we don't want anybody to go hungry or for their blood sugar to drop and pass out on us. So thank you both for that. And look, there's not a whole lot to dispute with the proposed changes in the budget and what's being proposed by the administration in their omnibus package. And again, for Santa Ana, I think that we're going to continue to compete well for these dollars that we've received in the past. I just wanted an update, and staff jump in on this if you want as well. I know that the Burn Jag Fund, I believe, was the grant that was being compromised or threatened to be compromised because of our sanctuary city policy. Any update on that? Do we know if that continues to be the case, or where are we on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair and Vice Chair. In terms of the Burn grant, the value is about $90,000. That's up there. This number that you see, the 203, that's a county number. So because of the pass-through, that's kind of how it's done. But the city did not apply for the Burn grant this last year. One, because the dollar value is not as significant. And also at the time of the application was when the Department of Justice was requiring a certification that at the time our city attorney as well as our chief of police was not comfortable signing based on the language. But that is in the courts. There is a stay on that. So we're waiting for a final decision to come out, but we don't anticipate an impact to the other grants, although our concern was always that this would be the start and a snowball. So to the extent that it stays at that level and that we can get the courts to provide a favorable opinion and decision, I think the city continues to be poised for large awards in other areas of the federal system. Got it.
Thank you for that. So, is any questions to our friends in D.C. from staff, Mr. City Manager, anybody else? I think it's all fairly clear. We all, again, this report is very detailed. It's very helpful. It's very specific to Santa Ana. So, I thank you both as well. So, in parting, anything else, Dan and Leslie, you'd like to leave us with, or?
I think that's all for now.
Yeah, I think it covers it.
Well, thank you both. And again, as Mayor Pro Tem said, her and I are going to be attending the conference tomorrow that's being held on the Census. And I think I'm covering the morning. She's covering the afternoon. And so between the two of us, hopefully we'll be able to reflect what our concerns are here in the city. And there are many, and they're severe. And it's funny that they're moving under the Voting Rights Act to go ahead and justify this decision to add this additional question. So we'll keep you both apprised and let you know what decisions are made down here, so you all can see where Santa Ana is.
Good, because we can keep our delegation informed, particularly both senators who are on the Jury Committee.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Stay warm out
Great.
there. Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And now moving on to the state report from Townsend Public Affairs, and I believe Casey, you're going to kick it off.
Yep. Good afternoon. Casey Elliott with Townsend Public Affairs. Just kind of want to give a brief, maybe a little bit of an overview as to what's going on in Sacramento, as well as some of the items that we've been working on behalf of the city. Currently, the legislature's in their spring recess. They're off this week. They will return on Monday. And they will immediately jump into one of the busier times of the year, the first House Policy Committee deadline. The deadline for the legislature to review any bills with a fiscal component in their policy committee is at the end of April 27th. So pretty much the next 4 weeks every committee will be hearing every week. So all of the bills that were introduced on basically any policy will be heard. Those bills that have a fiscal component that do not pass out of committee by the 27th will be done for the year. And since we're in the second year of a session, those would need to be reintroduced when the new legislature adjourns in December. For bills that don't have a fiscal component, that deadline's a couple weeks later, May 11th. But largely when we're talking about bills that impact local governments, there is some level of a fiscal component. I know that we'll get into some specific measures in just a little bit, so I think I'll hold off on some of those specific bills. One of the things that will also be impacting what bills move forward. Last week we had the swearing in of a new president pro tem, Ms. Toni Atkins, in the Senate, the first open LGBT pro tem, the first female pro tem. So there's a lot of changes going on in the upper house. The new pro tem, Ms. Atkins, she hasn't laid forth a specific policy agenda yet for the year. However, given her past record, it's very likely that housing, affordable housing, issues of homelessness, job creation, economic development, those are definitely issues that she's championed in the past, and I would anticipate that we'll see her continuing her efforts in those areas this year. You may recall last year she was the one who authored SB 2 for a permanent funding source for affordable housing, which has been a priority of hers for several years. She's done that bill several times. In addition to kind of helping establish the policy direction for the Senate for the remainder of the year, Ms. Atkins is likely to make some modifications to the policy committee makeup. All of the chairs, vice chairs, everything have been appointed by Pro Tem De Leon. Any new incoming pro tem has the prerogative to change around committee membership. Given where we are in the legislative calendar, that's unlikely to happen this month. However, I would not be surprised if at the end of April, once we kind of get through this busy time, there's some modifications. Depending upon what chairs end up changing, that could have an impact on what policies are able to make it through the second house. So that's obviously something we'll be paying very close attention to for the remainder of the year. Excuse me. Once the legislature moves past the April 27th policy deadline, they'll shift pretty much full mode into budget. Approximately 2 weeks after the policy committee deadline, we'll see the governor's office issue a May revise, which will take into account the state's revenues collected through tax season. right now it's obviously a busy time of year with everyone, filing taxes and the states, both 2/3 of the state's revenue comes in, basically in this 8-week period that we're in right now. Going into this kind of heavier revenue season, the state was up, I want to say it was close to $2 billion in receipts. I think a lot of that is attributable to increased receipts coming in December while people were trying to make maybe overpayments or react to the federal tax bill. So we'll kind of see over the next couple of weeks where things levy out. I think most people are anticipating that the revenue limits will be above what the governor had projected in his January budget, but probably not to the tune of $4, $5, $6 billion, which was some speculation earlier in the year. As it pertains specifically to budget items, we have been working with staff and with Assemblymember Daley's office to put in specific requests on behalf of the city of Santa Ana for priority projects that the assembly member can push within his caucus. We sat down with the assembly member a couple of weeks ago and we're able to outline 3 priority projects for the city that we'd like to see if we can work with him to secure direct funding from the city. Again, that would be direct funding to the city for these projects. So not through another program, but this would just be money for these projects directly to the city. We provided him a range of options on projects, including SARTIC, some advanced water metering projects, as well as some sewer annexation for some sewer work. So I think it's a broad array of projects. Also, provided him information as to how they tie into state priorities and what the state wants to do. So there might be some synergies there. So we're working with his office on trying to identify funding for those. The other item that we've been working on that not quite budget, not quite legislation, but is a product of the federal tax bill was the opportunity zones. We touched upon it last time at our last meeting, but included in the federal legislation was the opportunity zone program, which was new, effectively allowed each state to choose a number of census tracts. In California's case, it was just under 880 census tracts to participate in the program, and for those selected census tracts, they would be eligible for tax breaks for private financing that occurs within those zones. Working with city staff, the city was able to secure 11 census tracts under the opportunity zone. The state had originally made a recommendation of 11 tracts, then staff was able to provide comments and direct the state, and so the city was able to get its 11 top census tracts selected to that program, which is fantastic. So obviously that can be used as part of your economic development incentives that can be offered to people developing in those areas of the city. And then I think kind of the last major item I wanted to touch upon is just items coming up on the June ballot. Obviously, we're also getting into election season. There's 3 measures on the June ballot that will be that could potentially have impact on the city. The first one is the Parks Bond. Obviously, we've been talking about the Parks Bond for quite a while. It's on the June ballot. Polling that I've seen so far seems favorable. We've also been working with city staff to provide information to Assemblymember Daley's office on specific park projects within the city that we'd like to see funding for in this year's budget. In his January budget proposal, the governor included $1 billion from the park bond, assuming it passes, to be expended in the current budget year. So now we're trying to work with the city's legislators to outline the city's priorities, align those with specific pots of funding that are in the park bond, so that in the event that the park bond passes at the beginning of June, we'll be in a position to have city projects included in the 18-19 budget and get money directly to those shovel-ready projects this year.
Real quickly, so for the park bonds, we moved forward, because I was in assembly member's office 2 weeks ago. Eddie Garcia, I always want to call him, once a mayor, always a mayor, right? Eddie Garcia, who's represents the Coachella Valley, good friend, and I was in his office 2 weeks ago talking specifically about the park bond, because he's been one that's been pushing with this. And one of the questions that I had for him, and one definitely appreciated his efforts in pushing this along, the shovel-ready projects, they all have to, because obviously Santa Ana doesn't have a lot of land to put parks. And so I asked the question, as we continue to move forward in doing this joint master agreement, is that how can we figure out a way with the surplus land that we so call, because we have different definitions for surplus land. And I always tease our staff with that. I know what the definition of surplus land is for the state. I still am confused what the surplus land is for the city of Santa Ana. Obviously, school districts have to comply with the state law, and so they have a lot of surplus land. And so is it possible for us to utilize monies to purchase or partner up with school districts to provide open space? Because again, I think our city is currently right now in a phase of planning, wanting to do park projects, but specifically they're already in our park. So like we want to do skate parks, we want to do community gardens along our bike trail, we want to do some other greening, but to produce a new park, we do have some lands, but are we going to be able to utilize those funds to purchase that property, or does it have to be shovel ready? Do we know the details yet?
Sure. Yeah, and I think on some of those programs, the details and the guidelines will still need to be written. There's going to be funding that will go into some existing programs. There isn't a true joint use fund per se, like we would maybe think of like on the ed bond side. There isn't that fund. That said, the state does tend to look favorably on projects that have, more of a regional nature, are going to serve kind of more than one entity, particularly if there's a history of those entities working together for successful projects. So I think that there will be opportunities in guidelines to kind of modify those. There are, depending upon the certain pots of funding, acquisition is an eligible expense on some of the funds, not all of them, but on some of them there are. I think at least what the governor has in mind, and in our conversations with Natural Resources Secretary Laird, I think one of the things the state is trying to focus on this year, just given the timing of the bond, is what funding can we get out to programs that are more or less, that can get the money out in the existing year. So those pots of funding that would need further legislation or regulatory development, they aren't necessarily as high of a priority, just because the process of getting that money out would take longer, so they could allocate that in the 1920 budget. So a lot of the funding that we'll see go out this year, I think, will be things like hopefully the Santa Ana River Conservancy Program, maybe the Parks Program, some of those others that have already been set up, whereas some of the other entities like the cultural resources that don't necessarily have a program that they fit with will likely need guideline development. The two other measures that I just wanted to briefly mention that are on the June ballot, Proposition 69, that's part of the transportation infrastructure package that was done last year. That measure will essentially put the lockbox on those transportation funds. So the funds raised by the revenues raised by those taxes will have to be dedicated towards transportation. And then the last one, it's a relatively minor one, but Proposition 72 would allow for the development of rainwater capture systems, and those improvements to properties wouldn't trigger a property tax reassessment. So it would kind of help, I think the idea is to help encourage folks to to develop these rainwater capture systems, whether they be on a larger scale or on a personal scale, and not have to have a concern of, if I add this rainwater capture system, is it all of a sudden going to trigger a property tax reassessment on my property? So that's a piece that's on there, which could hopefully facilitate some more of those types of projects locally.
Thank you, Casey. So stay on call. We're going to call on you in a bit. And again, I wanted to also begin by saying we really appreciate the improvements on your report as well, and how it references specific needs to Santa Ana. So I think both you and Holland and Knight have been very responsive to this committee in making sure that we not only get broad overviews of what's happening and updates, but really specifically tailored opportunities for Santa Ana. And I, want to begin by telling you thank you. I know I went on a day trip with the Orange County Water District to receive a recognition from both the Senate and the Assembly on the floor, and we were able to fit in some meetings for the city while I was there on behalf of the Water District. And I know we met with Assemblymember Ting, who's the author of AB 3171 on homelessness, and so we were able to have a good meeting with him then. And I understand that I think last week or the week before, you were able to arrange a meeting here in the district office with Assemblymember Daley regarding 3 projects. And I think, Julie, you attended on behalf, and Jorge and staff, to talk about 3 projects that are very important, and one of them being Sartic, obviously, and the other one being the sewer system there on 17th and Tustin, which is sort of a county island there that we've been trying to develop, and it's been real difficult to move forward with that because the infrastructure isn't in place, because it is a county island. And so annexation, I believe, was discussed, and I think the Assembly member was very supportive. And I'm not sure what the third item was that...
It was for advanced metering infrastructure. We're looking at, it was a $4 million ask. The total build-out is valued at $16 million, so it's 25%. And the Assembly member was pleased that it was just, just 25%.
And he said yes to all 3?
He said yes to all 3 in terms of moving them forward.
Man,
working on them.
You guys are a persuasive bunch. We got to send you guys more often. So, I know you were talking about some of the bills just on 2162, the Chew bill, which the Assembly member is, I think, a co-author as well, or a sponsor.
Yeah,
that's a good bill. So, keep your eye on that one. Hopefully we take a support position. I'm not sure as we go through this, but talks about, affordability and making funds available to communities and to cities. And, when they're 100% affordable, it's kind of, I know that there's going to be a little bit of a hiccup, and I don't see our friends here from the league, but,
We had a meeting today that I couldn't be at. We had
all right, so
meeting.
they may take an opposed position on this because there is sort of a local control kind of being removed from this, but at the same time, there's a trade-off. I think for those of us who want to see a good blend of market rate and affordability, I don't think we'd be as hostile to it. But look, it's a discussion that needs to be had. We'll follow that bill along. But thank you all, and thank you to staff for going to that meeting with Assemblymember Daley. I think both the Mayor Pro Tem and I were busy that day, unfortunately, and we weren't able to attend. So it sounds like you guys knocked it out of the park. But Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes, thank you, Councilman Sarmiento. Just very quickly, Casey, I appreciate the update too to the to your report on the homelessness. I also had the when I was in Sacramento 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go on behalf of SCAG and our annual legislative. But of course, I'm always trying to take in meetings, and that's why I don't call you, because SCAG has its own lobbyists, and so they're able to get meetings for me, and so I'm able to connect with our legislators, and I had the opportunity to meet with Speaker Anthony Rendon and shared with him the issues around homelessness. But I also had the opportunity to run into to Ian Calderon. And he was speaking to me just very quickly that he has a potential bill coming as it pertains to doing a pilot or changing in regards to mental health funds, to seeing that how cities can utilize those funds. Can we look into that? And again, it was between elevators. We were speaking, and because we were asking him, like, hey, what are you guys doing for cities? And he says, look, I'm working on something. Contact my staff. And so I said, I'll get back to you. And so I would love to see how, because this conversation was also with Senator Newman as well. Senator Newman was trying to see if he can do a pilot to, instead of the county receiving those funds, that those funds would be received to some cities such as Santa Ana. I did pose a question as well to both of them and to the speaker, and what we possibly can do, as we have 58 counties. Each there's some cities that have, some counties that have multiple county seats. Obviously, here in Orange County, there's only one county seat, which is Santa Ana. And so I've been doing a lot of research in regards to the benefits of being a county seat and some of the impacts, right? Obviously, there's more impacts than there is benefit of being the county seat. And the research that I've been doing, the last time a city or a county seat actually chose to not be, that was over 100 years ago. And it was actually between the cities of Salinas and Monterey. And Monterey used to be the county seat, and then it ended up going to Salinas. But you have to take this to the voters, right? To all 34s by the state legislature. But one thing that I didn't see: who owns the land in the civic center? Obviously, it is the only way you can become a county seat is by petition to the county, and then the state legislature then makes that decision. But who owns this land? within the Civic Center. Obviously, we have various agencies. I would ask that question. I asked them. They were trying to get their staff to respond. They're like, well, that's not really easy. No one really hasn't brought these issues up. And I bring the issue up simply because of the homeless situation that every county seat is under siege. In regards to that, no monies are coming to us. The county is definitely responsible, that receives the funding. Obviously, we cannot turn our backs on our residents, so we're continuing to do all we possibly can to manage the situation with the very limited funds. But if we wanted to move forward, how could we, and I'm not sure if it's the big 11 cities or all the county seats coming together and figuring out how can we move a bill forward to receive additional funding specifically to the county seats to address the homeless population? Obviously, we have the biggest impact. Some of them that I raised that question to, they're like, oh, wow, that's an interesting, fascinating idea. So I just wanted to share that with you all because I think, I believe the other county seats would have interest as well. Because they're impacted the same way we are being impacted with the homeless population. And then as well, the opportunity zones, I want to thank you and thank our staff for moving that forward. I think is going to be very beneficial for, in particular for, our business community, more so our manufacturing community that provide a lot of tax revenue back to the city. And sometimes we forget about manufacturing. They are the life and blood of not only the United States, not only this state, but of our local cities. And we need to do all we possibly can to provide resources to them so they can continue to thrive here in this community. And then finally, in regards to active transportation, I know we're moving on our fourth call projects, and that probably will be one for quite some time, and it's the biggest. And so as we move forward to submitting this, I would just urge, and if we can continue to lean on you, Casey, and your staff to making sure that we're able to navigate because we are applying for a lot of grants, multiple from the 11 to 15, more so than any other city in this county and even throughout the state. We're submitting, a lot of grants and so applications for active transportation. So it's my hope that if our staff needs help, that you'll be able to help support them. And then lastly as well is that there was a trailer bill in Bloom's bill last year that SCAG helped as it pertains to letter of no prejudice so that we could actually, if we do get awarded, that we can actually get those funds up front. And so making sure those current grants that we have that we're waiting to receive the money, if you can work with our staff to do those applications of letters of no prejudice so that we can start building versus waiting out to 2021, which most of our projects are going out and we've been waiting for several years. That would be greatly appreciated. And with that, I just would like just to encourage us as well, because I sit on a couple other legislative committees, and my position on a lot of these bills vary from SCAG to the local government commission to the Latino caucus to the California League of Cities. And the reason why Tony's not here today, because we actually had a board meeting at noon today at the toll roads. And I told him I couldn't make it because I had to be here, but can't be at two places. I wish I had a twin. I do have a twin. Obviously, he's not a female. He's a man, so he definitely can't be there for me. So I could only be here at one place. And so I just hope that we can continue to communicate with these bodies so that we're all on the same page in regards to a lot of these bills. Because obviously, sometimes the league takes a total different position than us. They're a little bit more conservative, that board. And so their position, obviously, I'm always on the other side. And so here, definitely, I'm obviously going to support the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I thought you were going to say you wish you had a clone.
That's
so
true.
I don't know, maybe since you have a twin.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
I wanted to just, sort of go off script a little bit and talk about some of what Mayor Pro Tem was mentioning about some of her positions she has to take on regional bodies, right? So there are positions that she has to take as a voting member of the Metropolitan Water District. There are votes that I have to take as a member of the Orange County Water District and other regional bodies. I think that we need to track those sometimes here because this is the Legislative Affairs Committee, so it's under the subject matter jurisdiction of this committee to be able to discuss what those issues are. Sometimes we're asked, and I know we have some water issues that both our agencies are being asked And it's interesting, they push it back to us and tell us to go back to our full councils. And is it an action that we have to bring back to the full body, or are we vested with that authority to be able to make a decision on behalf of the agencies or on behalf of the bodies that we represent? It's sort of a fluid, decision. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I think sometimes you go back to your councils, your bodies that you represent, or are you entrusted with that to be able to make a discretionary act on behalf? So I think sometimes it's used by agencies when they want to delay something. They'll have you say go back to your full councils versus just taking a position on its own. That's one. The other one is I know that we cover through our lobbyists federal matters and federal issues and state issues, but we don't cover county issues, which are becoming very tricky, and we saw that yesterday. So I think we need to incorporate that. I don't think we need a lobbyist. We don't need to incur that cost or retain anybody, but I think we need to track what the county is doing, because now it's becoming much more adversarial. And not adversarial in a bad way, but adversarial in a funding way, right? So, and impact. So to the extent that we understand what is happening at the body right across the street, and how it impacts us and the positions we've taken, their decision to rescind the judge's order is very, very impactful to Santa Ana. And I appreciate the city manager being there yesterday at the meeting with two of our council members to recite what Santa Ana's concerns are. But look, this it didn't shock me in the least. I kind of knew where they were going, and so I just think we can track those here, because sometimes we could take a more immediate decision. And I know we're having a special meeting, I believe, on Friday, right, Madam Clerk, to address the issues there. But there are times when we can take those up here as well and just track those a little bit better. So maybe what we do is we bring in a sub-element of what the county is doing, and maybe what some of the, not track all the regional bodies that we represent, but maybe those that, the committee members, anybody else on the council says, hey, I'm on sanitation district, there's a real tricky position that the district is taking, maybe it's adverse to the city, we'd like to get the committee's take on it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, so that's actually helpful. But just something, just some thought. But Jorge, I know you wanted to say something, but I just thought that would be helpful.
Sure, no, absolutely, thank you. And we can definitely put together a strategy, and I'll work with the city manager to make sure that we put something together that will be beneficial for the group. In terms of the positions, so part of what this committee recommended to the city council that was ultimately adopted was the legislative platform. And this year, for the first time, we outlined some guidance on how we would take positions. Of course, this body cannot act on behalf of the entire city council, but it can recommend. So that is one of the items that we have, is at least the discussion for that, although today would be very preliminary in the process. But in terms of something needing to go back to the city council, if it is something that is specifically outlined in the platform, that is something that the city council has authorized a position to be taken on. If the platform is silent on it, or if it is something that requires some additional dialogue, we do recommend that those items go back to the city council, and those would be staff positions, rather than have to do an 85 and try to go through and delay the process, because, as you mentioned, some of these are very time sensitive. So we do have that process. If we need to refine it further as we're finding things to adjust, we're more than happy to adjust that living document.
No, that's great that you incorporated that, because I know we've had that discussion here before, so now it becomes part of our platform. Talking about platform issues and positions on legislative bills, Jorge, I know that's yours. Can you go through it very briefly?
Very briefly, and really the purpose of the conversation today was, as this body had requested, working with Townsend, we do have the legislative matrix that covers quite a few items for Santa Ana. It's actually 35 pages, so we don't expect to go over that today, and really we are still very early in the session, so we're not necessarily looking to take too many positions. We did outline, and you should have a presentation in front of you that we put together today on a few items that we're specifically tracking. If you don't have the handout, rather than go through all of them, we just wanted to show you kind of what we're going to be doing moving forward. No, it should be this one. If you do not have it, we'll make sure that you have it. really the purpose of today is to start the dialogue and make sure that this is the format that the committee is looking for in terms of how we would bring in some of these priority projects. So we took out a few projects that we identified as wanting to cover. I'll do that really briefly. Really what we're looking to do is provide the title, provide our recommended position based on the platform or based on the knowledge that we have, briefly highlight what the purpose of the bill is and what our rationale on that position is. So this is the format of what we're looking to do moving forward. So some of them that you did mention earlier, although this one's 2161, we're starting to really shape and try to make these documents a lot more productive and beneficial to move the dialogue forward. So one of them that I will use as an illustration is AB 3171, the Ting bill, which was previously mentioned. This is something that Mayor Pulido did sign on as part of the Big 11, and we do outline his positions as the Big 11 as part of our legislative platform, so that everything is corresponding and that the positions that he takes are reflective of the legislative platform itself. If not, those go back to the full city council. So in this particular case, this would provide direct one-to-one funding directly to cities. So we do have a support position on that. We did provide a letter of support. All letters of support, opposition, or any position are now copied to the entire city council, all three of your appointed officials, as well as the executive management team, so that staff and the council are all aware of what's happening with the legislative positions. So right now we have really only identified two bills, this being one, where a position has been taken on. We do anticipate that as things start coming into the policy committee meetings over the next couple weeks, that we will start to receive a lot of those requests. We've started to receive those now, so we'll be going ahead and tracking those, and we will be tracking separately what the city's positions will be as opposed to what positions individual council members would like to take. They don't always correspond, and if a council member has a dissenting view, they have the opportunity to present that, and we will prepare that on their behalf. So today we're not asking for positions to be taken. We wanted to more show this and then allow for dialogue on if this is useful, if you'd like changes to this, so that we can continue to mold this to be a useful document.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No, this is fantastic. I appreciate this is what other regional boards I sit on provide us, and so it always makes the most sense. One of the issues that I would just, as we move forward with taking legislative positions on behalf of the city, obviously we will do it as individuals, but in the other committees I do sit on, it's really much when we have a legislative committee, what they do, we vote on it, and then we bring it to our full, for example, to the SCAG, we bring it to the full regional council just for them to affirm, right? So really, it's 16 of us really voting on behalf of SCAG, and then we take it to the regional council to affirm. Obviously, we can't have 63, 70 members commenting. It's a big board, and so they put that vested, trust in us to review, and obviously it's very diverse. Obviously, there's only two of us here. The last thing that I want is that if we do support all these various bills and you bring to the council, and we can't continue it because we're not all on the same page. So I think if we can set some kind of policy where this board can actually vote on something and the council can affirm it. They don't support the affirmation. Obviously, there's no support position as a full body of a council. But ultimately, we already know that we're going to be sometimes in a position where we don't support bills unanimously. And so again, as this body, and I know there's conversation later, if we're going to be an ad hoc versus a standing committee, so that may change as well. And so I think we need to be strategic about how we move forward and present these bills. Obviously, you can't do it at the council because we're going to be there all day, every day. So I think we have to put some language that the council allows, certain members of the council to say, hey, this is what we support. You affirm it. And if not, then it goes nowhere. But if we're going to be out there discussing, hundreds of bills, we're never going to get anywhere. And for us at SCAG, that it's put on there, a whole report's put together, our positions, and then it's presented to the regional council. Rarely do we get any different kind of opposition? 99% of the time, they're all supportive. So, because the last thing I want is for this to come and we're there for 2 hours or telling you to continue it because we don't know where we're at.
I would agree with everything that Mayor Pro Tem just said. By the way, this is really, really good. So, congratulations to you, Mr. City Manager. And boy, you're going to have a tough time having to convince us that there's no value in what we're doing here. So, I'm just kidding. But I think that the only thing I would say that we could augment this with is, there's groups like the League that will support, oppose, support if amended. So if we could incorporate their positions as well, just because it's indicative of where they are and it helps us kind of, decision make. But I think that what Mayor Pro Tem is talking about, just like, the mayor can go and join the other Big 11, Big 10 mayors and make a decision on AB 3171. I think he's sort of vested with that right. We have that right vested to him by the voters and by the council. Again, I think committees shouldn't have the ability to do anything that circumvents the full council, but at the same time, on this subject matter, should be able to take a position. And I think that's why it was important for you to incorporate the language that you did in the platform. So thank you for that. And I think this is more of a template of what we're going to be seeing as we move along. So that's very helpful. So let's go ahead and move along to item number 4. And I know that's yours, Madam Clerk. And why don't we do this? Because it's related to, in my opinion, it's related to item number 7. Let's move up item number 7 as well to this. At this point, so we can take both of those matters jointly. And so we have a request to speak. And if anybody else, and Ernie, if you want to move the camera a little bit further, you can get up in the front row. But if you're good there, feel free to go ahead and start. If anybody wants to speak, please raise their hand. But I do have a request to speak from a member of the public, Mr. Dave Hohen. The floor is yours, sir.
Is this
That's it.
Is? Well, thank you for letting me speak. The last time I spoke before this committee, this room was packed, so the offer for food would have never worked. And thank you for that offer, but I'd already eaten. But also, that item was in regards to a city council member who was under consideration for censure. I know you two will remember that person, and certainly, Maria, you will remember that person. I don't know who else was here at the time, but at any rate, I was very disappointed in the outcome of that because I know it's very hard to figure out how to do that, but I always feel like there should be a penalty when somebody does something wrong. I know that's a really hard thing to figure out. Maybe your idea of having a paid counsel, you can at least dock their pay for some things being done wrong. Anyway, but the other thing I wanted to talk about was the mayor's veto power. I know the city attorney said that there is nothing in the city bylaws or whatever that allows him to have veto power over a majority vote. But I know the attorney who gets a lot of press for the mayor or whoever he's representing has said that it was within his right to do that. But I want to make sure that there is nothing in the city laws or bylaws that says that the mayor can have veto power over a vote, because that, of course, makes a dictatorship. So I want to make sure that that's handled. I don't know what the appropriate action is for the mayor at this time, but if there's nothing in the laws that says that he can do that, then he obviously acted improperly. So just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Dave. Anybody else have any comments? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and, because item number 7 was raised by me, and 4 is more of a sort of a larger policy issue. I think what it does, though, one's related to the other, just because I don't know, as we go through our discussion of the council policy regarding any potential violations of our code of conduct and ethics. It kind of falls under that paradigm. Just to give some context, we know that on March 6th, we had a council meeting and there was an issue of putting district elections on the June ballot. And so I kind of want to narrow the scope. It really isn't dealing with district elections. It's really dealing with what happened after that vote was taken and after that adoption was made by the majority of the council. So I know we can disagree on the underlying question of district elections, and I know the Mayor Pro Tem and I disagree on that, but what I'm trying to do is limit the scope of what happens when we take a vote that's been duly performed by a majority of the council. So let's just say it's some other substantive issue that we adopt by a majority of the council. It's done according to all of our policies and procedures, and I know we're both very specific on procedures and following policy. We can disagree with the final outcome or determination, but as we get to that is something that we have to respect as a process. And that's where I guess I'm a little concerned, because today it's district elections, tomorrow it's the budget, the day after it's an appointment of the city manager or appointment of somebody else. And so all those things, I think, impact the integrity of the process that we have as a city council here. So I really want to limit the scope to what happens, what are the ministerial obligations of a member of the council, and specifically the mayor that's vested with those rights under the Charter Section 413 when we go through and you have a majority of the council take an action. And I know Mayor Pro Tem does a lot of research, and some of us maybe don't do as much, but I do every once in a while, and I try. So I want to kind of let you guys know that I did a little bit of research on this on a city that Mayor Pro Tem loves, and that's why I kind of look to them. It's the city of Riverside and the county of Riverside. So they have an action that's very interesting, and you probably know about it. So the mayor is suing his city council, right, and the city, because they have a charter. They're a charter city as well, and they've actually have an express condition in their charter that does give and does vest the mayor with veto power. And so the council kind of overrode that, and he's suing to say, wait a minute, this is expressly written in our charter, adopted by the voters. You can't do this, right? And so to me, as an attorney, it was an interesting area of law, because here we don't have that express language, right? Nor do we have the express language that when the mayor believes in his mind, his or her mind, believes that there's something that is not legal or not proper, for you to have an obligation to not attest or sign a matter that's been duly adopted by a majority of the council. We're not talking about funding or appropriation. We're just talking about general attestation obligations and ministerial responsibilities. So it's funny that matter in Riverside is going to be happening. It was filed, I believe, on March 9th of this year, and so we're on concurrent paths. I called a couple of friends over there, and they told me what they're doing, and they said, boy, you guys are doing kind of an interesting thing. So it is an interesting area of law, and I think there isn't any real good case law out there. I mean, you could look to I think, is it Montebello that had something on this? I forget what Sonia had referenced when we were at the council meeting, but in any event, so if one of us decides we don't want to fulfill our obligations that are required by the charter, I think that is a violation at the very least of our code of conduct and ethics, because we may not agree with something, and so you can sign and attest to something because you're basically just affirming, again, what the vote was, and you're saying, okay, 4 members approved, 3 didn't. I'm signing because I'm witnessing and attesting what the outcome was. And you could be in complete disagreement with the outcome, and you can sign under protest, but you sign nonetheless, and then you can attack that outcome later, right? But to not sign and to not fulfill those responsibilities really does create a troubling outcome. And it does, in essence, become sort of a veto power that is allowed in some cities, as we see in Riverside, but we don't have that. At least my search and my research of the charter doesn't have that anywhere for the mayor pro tem, or any member of the council to take a position like that. So in any event, that's the context in which I wanted to bring it. More a very narrow, specific scope, not talking about the underlying issue, but just talking about what our obligations and responsibilities are, and specifically what obligations and responsibilities the mayor has. And again, in that conversation, do we even have anything that I believe was referenced by Mr. Hohen? Is there any sanctionable remedy that we have under our code? And if we don't, well, maybe what we do is we have that conversation. I know that one of our colleagues, Councilmember Villegas, continues to talk about we need to talk about our code of conduct. What do we do? I think his question, I believe he hasn't articulated it completely, but I think what he's getting at is we have sort of a toothless code of conduct and code of ethics where we can't do anything because it's values based right now, and because it's sort of on the honor code that, hey, all of us should follow these things, but what if you don't, right? So that's, I think, a conversation that, you wanted to have, Madam Clerk, and kind of talk to us about. But under that discussion, again, what can we do? And if you can tell us what we've done before, because we haven't had any of these remedies, but other committees that have, or other members that have sat on this committee have taken some action when there have been violations. I can go back to Councilmember Bustamante and his conduct that we all saw, and I believe there was some other instances, but maybe you can go ahead and give us some background on that.
Thank you, Chair and members present here. I have copies of a report that I prepared, and it's available back there if anybody would like to get a copy. But basically what I'm providing is some historical background as to how this item came about. What I had presented back in about 2014 was a list of types of violations and the types of enforcement agencies that currently are available to you. So, for example, Brown Act violations, the existing reporting agencies are the Orange County District Attorney's Office, the Grand Jury, and the Attorney General's Office. So those are the three existing agencies that if there are Brown Act violations, those could be utilized. And, and then I go on to include, how those are reported, et cetera, et cetera. The next is, Political Reform Act violations. So those are campaign contribution related or the Statement of Economic Interest. So if there's any types of violations in those kinds of forms, the enforcing agency is the Fair Political Practices Commission, and they have a very good enforcement process that anyone could follow. So those, and then I include the phone number and the contact information for that. The next is the current Code of Conduct and Ethics Code of Ethics and Values violations. And at the time when the policy was developed, the members that established the policy said that it was going to be values-based. This was back in 2008. Since then, the state actually adopted the AB 1234, and the enforcement agency for that is the FPPC. So if the city wanted to use the FPPC as the enforcement agency for any ethics-related violations, that may be one of the agencies that currently is available to direct any complaints to. The next is, and I apologize, any charter or municipal code violations. There's currently a provision in our charter that says any violations of the charter are a misdemeanor. How those are enforced, I'm not really sure. It just basically says that it's a misdemeanor to violate any section of the charter. And then I believe starting in 2016, the Ethics Committee at the time reviewed several different policies, including the City of LA and the City of San Jose. Those were two of the many cities that were considered for a possible censure policy. And so the committee actually directed staff to prepare policies for them to consider. The city manager's office took the lead on those and prepared option number 2, which was the City of Los Angeles. The elements that were included were just disapproval and a censure process. And option 3 was the City of San Jose, which with more options. They included an admonition, a sanction, and a censure process. That model included some investigation procedures, so that one was a lot more thorough. The committee at the time directed staff to blend the two, the City of Los Angeles and the City of San Jose, and that's how we came and presented the censure policy that was presented at the last committee meeting. I'm sorry. So basically, we're here to receive input as to what kind, if any, policy you would like to have staff work on, and then once that's drafted, it would be presented to the full council for approval.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and I'll go ahead and open it up to Mayor Pro Tem, but maybe we could hear from our city attorney as well once we start moving on to some of the other items as well, and what some recommendations are. But before Mayor Pro Tem asks questions, can you tell us what we've done in the past when there have been issues of misconduct, potential violations of the code of ethics? What have committees past done?
The 3 examples that I can think of in the recent past were 85As, so where council members actually placed items on the city council agenda to consider sanction or disciplinary actions against council members. The other one was a letter of reprimand, basically from the ethics committee that went out to another member of the council for violating the municipal code.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Great, thank you. I had to stand up for a minute, getting a cramp. I worked out very quickly, and before I came, so I do have a question as it pertains to AB 1234. Obviously, we don't really have a stick, and it's kind of impossible to ask our city attorney to prosecute us when she represents the city and the council. It's a total conflict. And so I think we need a different body, and obviously I don't trust the other bodies here in Orange County. Obviously they haven't enforced many laws and going after elected officials. And so we really need somebody that actually has been, and they come after us and they find us immediately, is the FPPC. They have. And so I encourage all our staff and all our electeds now to fill out your 700 forms, because you will be fined $100. And they do it immediately because they obviously need the money. And so they're paying attention. And so I would encourage and recommend that we do use the FPPC. I know there's been conversations about, possibly partnering up with the County of Orange, since they just move forward with their ethics. Obviously, I'm not in agreement with that for my prior statement. And again, when you have elected officials, or if we are able to get an outside body, a third party to make that investigation, I'm willing to move in that direction. But I would more be willing to support the FPPC to address some of these issues. The other concern that I do have is that, again, and I continue to speak about this, is that we have a very antiquated system here. City government here in Santa Ana is very archaic. Our charter is about 100 plus years old, have had a comprehensive update in over 70 plus years. And so when you take a look at that, and I'll be discussing some of the issues that I found out, and I've sent to our city staff as I continue to read the charter every day, and the municipal code, on my spare time. I enjoy reading those documents because I love to continue to learn. But obviously, the municipal code and our charter, they're extremely outdated. And so for us to count on what the charter says and what a lot of the municipal code, because we have yet to address some of the old ordinances and resolutions that we have in place that are extremely outdated and may not really be consistent with today's environment. And so before we set any kind of policy that's tied to our municipal code or charter, we need to think very hard. And this is an opportunity for us to go back to the voters and clean up a lot of these issues in our charter that are affecting us to govern efficiently into the 21st century. And so I can't today tell you that I would be supportive of, going based on our current charter or our current municipal code until we actually do a comprehensive cleanup and update to making sure that what we're trying to do here today is consistent with, really the what we decide to do moving forward with the current status, because obviously the charter right now we talk about a misdemeanor. Well, what does that mean and who's going to enforce that? Obviously, we can't have our city attorney do that. And so in the past, I know we've reached out to the district attorney's office and they've gone and done that. And sometimes they come, sometimes they choose to do it, sometimes they don't. We can't depend. We need a body that, is going to be firm and saying, look, you violated X, Y, and Z. You're going to be investigated. I don't care how friendly you are, if you have 4 members of the council. No, if you violate something, you need to be investigated. And period. It's not about, well, we think it's this way. No, we think it's that way. You follow the process. No, you didn't. It needs to be spelled out very clearly. And I don't think we've done a good job at doing that, obviously, for the prior reasons that I've mentioned. And so I just took a look at this. I would love to review it more, Maria, so I can give you some more input, because I really believe that if we do decide to move forward, I really believe that we need to do it right. Always putting a bandage approach to something like this that's so sensitive. And really, at the end of the day, it's about accountability and transparency. And if we continue to follow the current charter and the current municipal code without doing our due diligence and observing really where is the real stick here, because if we go back to the charter, and I'll give one example in regards to the mayor's administrative duties. Obviously, it spells out clearly what his duties are as a mayor. As a council, it also spells that out very clearly. But there are times, for example, in regards to another great example, when we decided to hire the city manager, the mayor decided not to sign the resolution. We then had to come back to the council to make that change so that the mayor pro tem can sign. So is it the job of the mayor pro tem according to the charter, but obviously that council made that change? Or per the charter, is it the full responsibility of the mayor to do his job regardless if he voted yay or nay on an issue? And I think that's what's not real. I think there's a lot of confusion here, and even with our mayor. Obviously, if the mayor wanted to sue the city, if he wasn't supportive, he could have done that. But he doesn't have veto power. And so I do agree with Councilor Sarmiento as he's done his research. I am in agreement that as the mayor, it states very clearly what his job is. Regardless of the personal politics, I do truly believe that there comes a point in time where you have to do your job, that what the voters ask you to do. And obviously he has administrative duties. We don't have those. Obviously the city council has put some of those on the mayor pro tem, but the mayor pro tem is appointed, is not elected. And it doesn't state anywhere in the charter that I have those duties or members of the council. And so again, as I go back to the charter and what I see in the municipal code, it's a lot of confusion. And so I think we need to clear that up and be very specific as we move forward before we try to sanction anyone. Because at the end of the day, the last thing that I want is to continue to do what we're doing here today, trying to set a process in place with 100-year-old charter that doesn't make sense. And we have yet to review our municipal code as well. We have hundreds and hundreds of ordinances and resolutions that are extremely outdated, that really are not in today's times, that were voted on a long time ago. And I could give you a great example in regards to the funds, the liability fund, the general fund. If you look at that, was in 1979. Today we're in 2018. And how did we get from 1979 through 2018, somewhere along the way, issues in regards to that fund never came back to the city council. Somewhere between, city staff made a change without confirming to the council. So that is very problematic as well. And so I have always said we got to follow a process. But again, as I look back at the charter and I look at the municipal code and have been conversing with our city attorney, Sonia, she's in agreement. We need to do a comprehensive update. I think the city clerk has continued to recommend that we need to do a comprehensive update. And this is our moment in time that we can do this November. It's time, because we cannot move our city forward continuing to be under a system that is extremely archaic. It doesn't benefit us as a body, nor does it benefit the residents. And so I think it's time for us to do things right. And so right now, those are my comments. I have to read all of this to give you more input.
So I'll go ahead and turn to our city attorney, who's holding the fort down for Sonia while she's gone. So Christina, welcome. And I think I followed what the Mayor Pro Tem was saying. As I read Section 413, it's very clear what that is, no matter how old it is. I mean, the law is the law, and the charter is the charter. Those are the guidelines, no matter how old they are, no matter how outdated, confusing, maybe old they are. Those are the charter rules that we have to abide by. I mean, and to say, well, they don't seem to work anymore, it's like saying, well, look, I disagree with some parts of the U.S. Constitution. I still have to follow them and live by them, and we all do as citizens here. So is there any confusion on what the responsibilities of the mayor are when there's a duly adopted resolution?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to echo the opinion that I know that Sonia has shared, which is that the duty of the mayor under the charter to sign the ordinance is ministerial, which means that there's no discretion to decide not to sign the ordinance if it's been duly passed in accordance with the city laws.
And Madam Clerk, is there any dispute that was a duly adopted agenda item on March the 6th? I believe it was item number 65B. Is there any dispute that somehow that wasn't duly adopted, at least the section having to do with putting that matter on the ballot? We're not talking about the funding, we're talking about that.
The vote was a 4-3 vote, with the majority of the council voting in support of that item.
So given those sets of facts and those circumstances, my opinion is that there was and there is a violation of not following the charter. Again, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. Look, we need to clean so many things up. But if we went through and said, charter's outdated, our municipal code is outdated, our general plan is outdated, everything is outdated, and we just say we're not going to do anything until we get an updated one, then the city's in paralysis. And that is also not a good position to be in. Then we don't do anything. So I think it sort of, that position undermines our responsibilities and our obligations to the voters, because we can't tell the voters, well, you know what, we're dealing with a bad set of rules. Let's just not do anything until we get everything adopted. That's not going to happen. I think, it's too short of a time. But what we have to be is true to what we were vested with, which is an obligation to when we see a violation occur, this committee is vested with overseeing ethics and our responsibilities and obligations as council members. And so my recommendation would be we don't have any remedies under the Code of Ethics and Code of Conduct to sanction or do anything that's punitive. But what we've done in the past is the committee has rendered a letter to the full council saying, based upon what we've seen and the fact pattern here and the rules that were given and the charter language, we see a violation. And I think there was a letter that was drafted by this committee under the signature of the chair that was sent to the full council when we had a member of the council use the city seal during an election. And that wasn't proper as well. Again, there was no remedy. There wasn't anything that you could do to reprimand formally that council member, but what the chair and the committee decided is that it's a clear violation. Let's send a letter to the full council identifying that. So that would be my motion for this committee to send a letter to the full council explaining what we see here, and that we're pretty, we're rendered without many other sanctionable powers to reprimand that action, but at the very least, calling attention to it. So in the event that we do come back and we do want to clean some things up, we can start with this, where we remove this language and just vesting the mayor with that right. But if somebody refuses to sign, we have to get these items that are duly adopted somehow attested to and move forward. Then if we don't do that, we're thwarting the will of the voters. Mm-hmm. It's not our will. We're vested with rights by the voters, so we're really undermining the voters. And that, to me, undermines our entire democracy. I mean, it really just swallows everything up. So so that would be my motion. I'll put it out there. Again, it's a very limited scope of what I'm looking at. It's violating a clear obligation and responsibility that is vested in the mayor by our charter.
Mr. Mitchell, before I make a decision, I just want to be very clear, and I guess, and I'm not here to protect any member of the council or the mayor as it pertains on this issue. I think I've always been someone that has been a straight shooter and someone that has always followed the process, even though when certain members of the council have chosen not to follow process. But there was precedent set when, and I gave the example, maybe I wasn't clear enough, but when Mayor Polito chose not to sign city manager's contract, we set a precedent that we were going to allow the mayor pro tem to sign, right? So we then bypassed the charter, we set a resolution, or we went and asked for me to sign contracts. So here we are, this is not a contract, obviously, but we set some kind of precedent saying that if the mayor chooses not to follow his duties, we'll go ahead and turn around and ask the mayor pro tem to do so. And so again, I just want us to be consistent, whether this is a contract or whether this is an ordinance. We still bypass the mayor and from him doing his duties or not. Obviously, it was a 4-3 vote. He voted no, refused to sign. And we're in the same boat again, here again. Obviously, he was on the no side. He refused to sign again. But this time around, we've decided to take him to court. But we didn't do that when he chose not to do his duties to sign a contract. And so, again, I just want us to be consistent. And right now, there isn't inconsistencies. We kind of set some kind of precedent as well. And this is why I'm not disputing you on the funds that were being used, that were voted upon, because this city set precedent and used those funds prior for other things. So that's why you never heard me say anything about that, because literally the city has set precedent for you all to use those funds, even though I've always voted no to not to use those funds. And that's why I'm not saying anything, and I haven't said anything publicly, for the mere fact that the city of Santa Ana has set precedent. The city council as well has set precedent and has let the mayor get away, and he got away with it. He chose not to sign the city manager's contract. We then just went and did a resolution so that the mayor pro tem can. So I just want us to be consistent.
That's a good point. And I think that's where my conversations with the city attorney were exactly on that point, because the original consequence to the mayor refusing to sign was, let's vest that authority in the mayor pro tem as we did with the contracts. Mm-hmm. But Sonia's response to me was, this is different, because this is when it's resolutions, it's vested in the mayor per the charter. When it's the contracts, that was a code that we could amend. This is something that had to go to the voters if we wanted to have the mayor pro tem have that authority, right? And so that question was asked and answered to the city attorney, because it was a very good question. That was my first question. Okay, let's do what we did. And I think maybe to incorporate, to be consistent, I would say we should send a letter of reprimand not just for failing to sign this resolution, but for failing to sign the city manager's contract that was duly adopted as well. That would be consistent. That's twice now that our mayor failed to sign. One, we had recourse. We had a remedy that we were able to amend the code, which we can as a city council. Here we don't have recourse because we'd have to go to the voters and put it on a ballot. So legally, that's why we're here. And on the city manager's contract, we could circumvent the mayor because it was a code that the city council could amend. So that's the difference, and so that's where the lack of consistency is on this on the signing of the contract and the signing of the resolutions.
Madam City Attorney, can you state that for the record that is the case before I second the motion?
Well, I can tell you that I can't tell you that the code says that because I haven't looked at that particular issue on where the mayor's authority to sign contracts, from where that derives. But let me just say as a general matter, if the right derives from the municipal code, then the city council has authority to amend the code or adopt a resolution that clarifies or somehow interprets the code. But if the right derives from the charter, it can't be changed except by a vote of the people. So without knowing specifically what your code says about the mayor's rights and obligations with respect to agreements, I don't want to speak to that specifically, but generally I will say that if it's in the code, the council has authority to make the change. If it's in the charter, only the voters can make a change.
Madam Clerk, I know you had contact with City Attorney Sonia Carvalho. Can you confirm, that position of what she mentioned to Councilman Sarmiento?
Yes, that's correct. And she also referenced the city of Montebello as the case that actually triggered state law to allow the mayor pro tem in the absence of the mayor to sign contracts.
Okay, fantastic. And so, look, for me, again, I just hope, and I'm going to second this motion here moving forward. Obviously, the mayor is not going to be sanctioned. We don't have that power. Only a letter is going to be written to him indicating that he has, by the chair, that he has not fulfilled his duties as a mayor. Obviously, I think we all want to make sure that we uphold the charter and our municipal code. But at the same time, as we move forward, I would just hope that we could accept my friendly amendment, Councilman Sarmiento, that as we move forward with in regards to the the liability fund / general fund, that as we move on, that we are consistent with that as well, and we hope that we would bring these issues to the voters in November to clean all this up so that we don't have any more of these kinds of conversations. Because right now, I have to tell you that I'm kind of reluctant because, again, whether the charter says or not, we always kind of circumvent some kind of process to sometimes get what we all want. Sometimes it's in the mayor's behalf, sometimes it's on certain council members, and I've been on that 4-3 vote. But at the end of the day, when the law says something, we need to stick to that. And so, obviously, we have certain things in this charter that need to be changed, and I just hope that items like this will be taken to the voters in November so that we can clear all of this up and we don't have to be here again.
So I'll accept that friendly amendment in addition to another amendment. So the amendment I think that the Mayor Pro Tem is talking about and that I would support is to identify this as an area that we should get some, adopt some changes with the approval of the voters. And so maybe putting this on the ballot in November to allow the voters to opine on whether or not we want to vest this sole responsibility on the mayor, and maybe take a look at maybe expanding that, in the absence of the mayor or in the refusal, or in the mayor's refusal to sign, it would go to the mayor pro tem. If the mayor pro tem refuses to sign, it goes to the council members. So that would be something that I think we could incorporate in the letter. The only other change I would make is that it would be going to the mayor, but it also goes to the full city council as well. And I believe That's how it was done before when formerly Chair Amesqua sent out the letter under her signature on behalf of the Legislative and Ethics Committee to the full council. I do recall the full council being copied on that. So that being said, I think going back to the broader issue on number 4, I agree with the Mayor Pro Tem. I think I'd like to maybe digest some of this. I think we're in a values-based code of conduct, and I think, again, it's pretty toothless. I think there is maybe a middle ground between being extremely punitive while at the same time being able to say to our colleagues if somebody missteps and there are clear violations that we've seen, that there is going to be some scrutiny on that and that we're going to be able to take some action. Again, we can't remove anybody from office because that's not our authority, but we can certainly call attention to violations that are blatantly made. And again, something I would definitely agree with is that we should take this out of our forum here in the county. Mm-hmm. It's just, we have too many relationships. There's too many opportunities for conflicts. I think it has to go to an agency or a body like the FPPC or the Attorney General's mm-hmm. office, just because those are state agencies. They deal with other jurisdictions, and we just can't. It's too difficult to police ourselves here in this county. It just doesn't make sense. And so to the extent we can see them, both of those agencies, as possible arbiters of questions that we may have come before us. Madam Clerk?
It's my understanding that one of the larger cities up north, either Sacramento or San Jose, actually has a contract with FPPC for enforcement violations. So they actually have them on contract and can submit different requests for them to review on behalf of the city.
Great. So I'll call for the question. I think I made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and move that along, and if a draft could be sent to my attention, that would be great. I believe, Mr. City Manager, you've got the next 2 items? Or at least one item.
So in terms of item number 4, just to clarify, we'll bring that item back, and we can get actually maybe input from you individually. One of the things I just wanted to point out, in the 3 sample policies that the clerk of the council has attached here, I think one of the things that stands out for me is item number 1 only has a censure option. Mm-hmm. Then there's a disapproval and censure option, 2 options for option number 2, and of course appropriately 3 options for option number 3. I think that's one of the things that stands out. So that's one of the things I would focus on in addition to the other mechanics of the process.
Agree.
Thank you. That's helpful. So I believe the next item is yours, so you can go ahead and continue speaking to the potential transition of this committee to an ad hoc committee.
Yes.
Right as soon as you guys started, we got right on track, and now we're gonna transition away. But go ahead, Mr. City Manager.
One of the things that became apparent when we were trying to schedule the meeting with Assemblymember Daley, and we started thinking about maybe scheduling a trip for both of you to go to Sacramento, was the mechanics of a committee member and the Brown Act requirements that come with it. And in talking to our city attorney, the idea of having this become an ad hoc committee would give all of us more flexibility in terms of trips or in terms of scheduling meetings. And so I thought I'd bring it to this committee for discussion.
That's a great point, and I'll go ahead and give the Mayor Pro Tem an opportunity to comment. So, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Obviously, there's only 2 members of this committee, and when, the meeting with, Assemblymember Daley, obviously either one of us could not participate, was on our calendar schedule, and, it's kind of after the fact. Obviously, things happen. City attorney says that we can't meet. So I do agree that we possibly need to do an ad hoc. If we're going to travel to Sacramento, that's great. If not, obviously, we both sit on regional boards that take us to Sacramento, where we can do our own lobbying as well when we're not just lobbying for the regional entity. So that's something else that we should keep in mind. But if you feel, Mr. City Manager, there are other issues as it pertains to such doing meetings with our legislators and we're unable to both attend, without, doing a public scheduling, then that really puts us in a very awkward position. And I kind of feel bad as well that we set up a meeting, the assembly member thinks that we're showing up and we can't show up, obviously because of the Brown Act. And so I think it's something for us to consider as we move forward so that we can be a little bit more nimble and being able to participate in ways where it won't impact us by violating the Brown Act.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this before us. I think I have the same concerns as Mayor Pro Tem. But really, and ironically or coincidentally, we couldn't travel together anyways, even if we converted this to an ad hoc, because we're both on the economic ed bit, whatever that's called. So we couldn't travel that way anyways. So I think that unfortunately, this isn't going to solve that problem. We have an issue. One of the things I was going to suggest is, this is funny, when we would travel to D.C. A little bit more often, I'm not sure if you recall, Jorge, one of us from the committee would go and the other one wouldn't. So, look, I think Mayor Pro Tem has, a lot of contacts in Sacramento because of her work that she's done through SCAG and through OCOG and through NALEO at the federal level. Both of us have been able to, reach out to good friends and colleagues. To the extent we don't have to travel together and maybe bring somebody else on from another committee, that was always real effective when we went to Washington in the past. We'd have the chair of the Public Safety Committee go with the chair of back then the Economic or the Legislative Committee, and there was no Brown Act violation because those members didn't sit on the same committees. And that kind of solved the problem, and we were able to take care of two subject matter areas. But here, I think, although it's well intended, I don't think it'll solve our problem where we can travel together, right?
The other advantage, I guess, would be, I believe and I'm going to look at my clerk of the council here for support. I believe that in order for a quorum, we'd have to have a majority of the committee members present for compliance with the Brown Act. So if this was a 3-member committee, then we still need 2 members, and then the third person could actually call in. But in this case, if one of you is missing, then we don't have a quorum. But if you were an ad hoc, one could call in and one could be present, and we could still conduct business. So there's still some additional flexibilities with ad hocs that we don't have with standing committees.
Okay.
So,
well, look, I think those are all really good points, and I think to Mayor Pro Tem's point, it's worth considering. Let's digest this as well. Let's talk about maybe opening this up to some of our other colleagues, and maybe what we do is we have a 3-person committee again. I think we're growing up, so I think that's important. So to the extent we can resolve it one way or the other, I think having the flexibility of an ad hoc makes sense. And if it can keep this sort of same framework where we're still doing the same work, because now I saw today a lot of value in what was presented to us. I really do. And again, it's to your credit and the staff's credit that they've worked really hard with our lobbyists to get us where we need to be. Again, I think because we sit on so many regional boards, we just never saw ours be as well constructed as theirs, and you guys have done a great job getting us here. So
thank you.
Yeah. I think we're done with that, and our last item is number 6, an update on the communications manager position, and I think that's yours, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Mr. Chair. At the last committee, you made it clear that you wanted to make sure that you were able to meet our communications person, and so we have somebody here. I'll turn it over to Jorge Garcia of my office.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, members of the committee. I would like to introduce Ryder Smith of Trepepe Smith. Following the last meeting, the city manager asked me to engage with a firm to help us in the near term while we do another permanent recruitment or some other arrangement is made. And in order to accommodate that immediate request, the city manager entered into an agreement not to exceed $25,000 with Trepepe Smith to provide on-call services and to augment staff support while we're in this influx period. The city manager had also indicated some potential changes that he wanted to see. So we brought on Mr. Smith, and I'd like to invite him to introduce himself, inform the committee a little bit about his firm, and answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Jorge. I appreciate the opportunity. Chair, Vice Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. So I have a firm. It's called Tripeppi Smith. We are a 11-person strong firm focused entirely on the state of California currently. We work with the League, the California Contract Cities Association, a number of local government associations, about 30 public agencies across the state of California, including about 20 different city governments that span from Livermore, California, Cupertino, Daly City up in Northern California, down here in LA County, including the cities of Duarte, Paramount, Bellflower, and then out here in Orange County as well. We tend to focus on local government specifically around the whole idea of how do we execute community engagement and education. And we also try to really do this a lot with traditional forms, certainly with full-time graphic artists on our team and using collateral material, printed material, but also heavy focus on social media and digital communications as well, because more and more we find that's where people are spending their time. And in addition to that, we also handle public relations and communications with the media and are helping out with some of that work as well, coming up with talking points, frequently asked questions, anticipation, and also drafting press releases in concert with city staff. So we're kind of offer a full kit of single stopping point for communications for public agencies, and are really excited to be on board working with the city of Santa Ana to help out where we can. There's obviously lots going on. Your city staff is, and just talking with them, is hugely dedicated to the idea of transparency and community engagement, and they're really fired about the opportunity to not only work with us to achieve some of that success, but obviously to find a long-term PIO who can work with the organization and carry out some of those duties. And we're equally happy to be on board to help them fulfill that mission and find a person to join the team.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and thank you for coming before our committee, and welcome. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, thank you. So first off, thank you, and thank you, Jorge. And I'm glad that we finally have someone on board. Obviously, crisis communications and communications period is vital, specifically based on what's happening right now with the homeless situation, and as well what's happening with sanctuary. You know, it's so many issues that we are currently facing here in the city. The question that I would pose and ask is that press releases today are kind of outdated. Mm-hmm. And so how we once did communications is so different than today. And I know it's the 21st century. You know, press, the way we once communicated, and obviously we're friends on Facebook, and I see the things that you do, the trainings that you've conducted. I've been a part of them. You do good work. Our community is a little unique, mm-hmm. different. Obviously, we're the 11th largest city in California. We're a very young city as well. Median age is 29.9 years of age. We're a diverse community as it pertains not only to our ethnicity, our culture, but more importantly about, the various income levels that we have here in this community. And so how we actually communicate is important. It matters. And so whether we're communicating with the Vietnamese community or the Latino community or those that are much younger, like the millennial totally different ways of how we communicate with these various groups. And I would just hope that we will be able to capture that because, again, traditionally, the Vietnamese community still gets its media via newspaper and radio and some television, because they have all those opportunities and they have those partners where they capture. The Latino community doesn't have that. They also don't read press releases or Nixle, so totally different. They still do their traditional media, but look, the fastest growing population that is connected to smartphones today is the Latino community and the millennial generation. And so however we can to continue to move in that direction and use social media and also use other forms of communicating with our community. And again, it's always great when we can do that mailer, but more importantly on sensitive issues, I just hope that we have an ongoing relationship to making sure that we get that information out sooner versus in later, and not just in the press release to get the attention to the media, but how do we get that attention to our constituents, specifically on this homeless situation? You know, residents kept asking us, what are some talking points? You know, how can we go to the Board of Supervisors and speak on behalf of the city? Where can we go and get that information? None of that is coming out, right? So I had to put that on social media myself, my statement, so that they could use, so that they can go speak. And so I think it's important to realize that we have a lot of constituents on Next Door Neighbor. We have a lot of our constituents that, you know, interact within our neighborhood associations, and that's another good way to get information out. And then the third thing, again, using social media and trying to capture as much of those of social media and these other forms of communication, so that we're in continued communication with our constituents. It's great that we're able to get the message out to the media and to our employees, but obviously, you know, the residents deserve to know what's going on, and we have not done a very good job in articulating or messaging the right narrative so that they could be informed and engaged.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So, you know, more than anything, I think we want to drive home to you and give you some guidance on what has compelled us to make sure we retain somebody either in-house or an outside firm. I think, you know, to the credit of the council, and I think to the credit of Mayor Pro Tem, you know, and others on the council, in the past, this organization has been information in, no information out. So, you know, that was a very outdated way of doing things, because what we feel is most important for transparency and openness is just sharing information with the public, good or bad. And so to the extent we have, you know, some tools to do that, we never did. We never had a PIO, we never had a communications director until recently. And so we've gone through a couple, but what we realize, it's a really complex city, and I think that's sort of cliche. You go to any city and they're going to say, look, we're really complicated, but Santa Ana really is complicated for the reasons that was just stated. So, you know, it's tough because you have, you know, as was said, some people still looking at print press, right? Some people still listening to radio and getting their information, and others that are, look, they're getting everything off this device. So we really span the spectrum of folks, young people especially, that are very engaged, and folks that just take advantage of the technology available, to some people not even having access to Wi-Fi in their neighborhood, right? So that's how closed off they are. And so we have such hard to reach populations in some way, and then we also have some folks that are very easy to reach through social media. So we really do span the spectrum. My concern has always been, you know, we have an obligation to both. We have an obligation to everybody on that spectrum to be able to reach them. So it does take a talented firm with a skill set that's broad, you know, and for you to understand, look, this isn't like, you know, communities that you can do just social media on, or some that you could just do traditional, you know, print, press, radio, TV. So, you know, hopefully you have, you know, that nimbleness in your firm with the 11 staff members you have, not only to do that, but to do it in multiple languages. We have, you know, a large Cambodian community. We have, you know, obviously a very large Vietnamese community, a Spanish-speaking community. So to the extent that, you know, you understand our dynamics, and you know, do what we, I think, do something that's missing, which is be more preemptive rather than reactive, right? So there are things that we know are going to be crises before they become a crisis, right? And if we could address the community first and message and create a narrative that's not going to alarm people, but, you know, sort of settle everybody down, and make people understand that, you know, things are under control, rather than somebody else defining our community, right? And that's what's been done for years, for decades, is that others have defined who we are, and they continue to try, right? And we see that happening on many issues. So if you can hopefully work with us to address that problem, then I think you're going to be solving a very big issue here in town. So I just wanted to say, you know, just thank you. Let's continue to work, and, you know, and what we can do is maybe get an update on the progress and, you know, things that are being done back at this committee, and we're certainly anxious to hear and anxious to continue working a bit. It'll be great getting to know you.
So
I look forward to
Councilman
it.
Sarmiento, just very quickly, just next steps, because I know you've been working directly with Jorge, but something coming before us. I don't know if there's anything in front of us here in regards to his contract, but some of the work product and what the scope of work is, if we can kind of review that, that would be great, one. And then two, as well as we move forward, who directly will be responsible for this communications person that's outside? Is it Jorge? Is it you, Mr. City Manager? Is it your deputy city manager? So the council can know and work directly. So I think it's important for us to know who we're going to be interacting with. Are we going to be interacting directly with him, sharing information, what we want? So I guess, what is that protocol? If that can be documented, or we're directly communicating with Jorge. Jorge helps us, paint a narrative with Mr. Ryder, and then, them bring back to the entire council on the messaging. I just want some clarity. Sure. It's great that, you brought someone on board, but what does that mean for us and our expectations?
Well, a couple of good question. The communications function was being led by Robert Cortez, the deputy city manager. I've just recently moved that over to Mr. Jorge Garcia because my deputy is overwhelmed with a few things that I'm piling on. So it would be Jorge right now. We brought in Trepepi Smith under a $25,000 contract just to help. In fact, we met on a Thursday, and I believe the next day, this issue at the library, so we said, well, you know what, since we just met with them, and I liked what I heard, let's engage this firm to help us, start framing this issue when we heard there was going to be some protesters and whatnot. So that was the first engagement. We've since also had him help us with framing speaking points around the U.S. Attorney General's actions that he was taking a few weeks ago and all of that. But the other part of the plan is to develop the more comprehensive scope, because this is $25,000 is not going to get us through the through the calendar year. So we hope to bring to you a contract. At that point, we would have a more developed scope of work. Jorge has already been working with Ryder in terms of developing this. But in terms of your questions, I think this is great feedback that he heard directly from both of you.
Absolutely.
What we envisioned is having him meet with each member of council to sort of get the different input from all of you, because we made it very clear that one of the many roles that this position will fulfill is the chief storyteller. But one of the things that we liked about this firm is that they do have capabilities with social media and some of these other venues and modalities of communicating. So, but I think it would be helpful, at least at the very beginning, to meet with each of you individually and get that direct input.
And who also would be in charge of our social media now? It's rare that, people are updating that platform. So whether I go on, I'm like, oh my God, if you need me to do it, I'll do it for you, just because, geez, it just, again, specifically on certain issues, and I had an opportunity to talk to Jorge, and wanting to thank Jorge again for really his leadership and really stepping in. And I keep on telling people now is that Jorge is Mark Lawrence. When Mark Lawrence was here, because Mark was here for a very long time, we never would go to the city manager. We would go directly to the assistant of the city manager to get things done. And now we know that he's in that position, and we're still trying to bombard you. And we're like, no, I got to go to Jorge.
The new and improved.
The new and improved Mark Lawrence, much younger, obviously, a lot more hair, right? Obviously, but
No, this is the before. And
yeah, exactly. Right? And so we gotta empower. We have to empower Jorge to the way we empowered Mr. Lawrence in that position,
yes.
Because we have yet to do that. And so, when I get frustrated because it's like I'm always having to message and do this myself and responding to 200-300 messages on Facebook. It's bum, but I have a full-time job, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm having to manage this for the city. And so when for example, on my walk for the East Side neighborhood, I'm almost at 500 views on the video. People are interested on traffic safety. They're interested, on quality of life issues like the homeless issue, like the tree issues, like ADA stuff, speeding. These are the concerns that folks have. And so when we have, a street closed, obviously, if you put that on there, residents are going to be like, oh, thank you for informing and engaging me. And if you look at today, how many people have actually liked and forwarded, it's amazing to see that that's the kind of information that residents want. They want to be informed and wanting to know what's happening with their government, but we're not doing a very good job, even though we have, social media. We're kind of active on social media, but not really. And we got to be consistent. You have to create that brand and consistency of sending stuff every day so that you get more people and more engagement. Or else it's not going to be successful. You just can't use social media like Councilman Sarmiento, go on there once a month, act like he's going to get 500 friends. That's not going to happen, right? The only way that happens, yeah, I don't see him on there a lot, but you see
both joined the same time.
Jose Solorio and myself, we're on there all day. Right? We're always, and that's what people say. You and Councilman Solorio are always on Facebook. And I'm trying to manage to step away because I was very stressed out yesterday over it. Because all the messages, I was like, I can't handle this. It's too much. And so we need the city to step up to help facilitate a lot of the concerns that the residents are having. In particular, one issue that we're facing now, which is the homelessness.
Just a quick response, Madam Mayor. Pro Tem, was that part of the scope of work that Jorge has been working with Ryder on developing is an assessment, a communications assessment. So we're asking for his input in terms of just coming in and taking a look at what our infrastructure looks like around communications, what are the weak points, what are the areas of improvement, and then recommendations on how we could start doing that. In terms of the ultimate goal for this position was to fill it with a classified employee. Now I'm rethinking that. But either way, when we first had our initial conversations with Ryder, we told him that's where we were looking. He was more than helpful and willing to help us maybe identify that person. So right now it's going to be a work in progress, but nonetheless we have a firm and we are going to engage even further, but we're going to develop a scope of work that we'll bring to the full council.
Great, thank you.
Well, yeah, I echo all those thoughts. Thank you, Jorge. And yeah, his plate's going to start getting really full too, by the way. So, right?
Remember marking his little piles?
I remember. You're going to need a large desk. So
Mine aren't as organized, but I know where everything is.
All right. Well, welcome aboard, Mr.
Thank you.
Smith. So it's Ryder Smith, or is it?
It's
Okay,
Ryder
got it.
Smith.
Okay,
Yes.
got it. All right. Well, I think that was our last item. So thank you all, staff. Great work, and we're adjourned.